finally made a promise to a girl that I knew I couldn't keep.
Hey everyone, it's me, John, here with the Master Chief to talk about Halo 5. And if you're a fan of Geek and Dorks Reviews at all, I've probably mentioned Halo before. It is definitely my favorite franchise on the Xbox, maybe one of my favorite franchises of all time. And there have been just staples in every installation of Halo or every edition of the game that keep adding fun and keep adding to the universe, and it's been really enjoyable. If you don't know the backstory of Halo, it was originally developed by Bungie Studios. I believe it was originally a project for the Mac, and Microsoft got involved with them and paid them to make it exclusively for the original Xbox. And on the original Xbox, it was like a system seller. Basically, people were buying Xbox systems just to play Halo. And the tagline on that edition, if I remember correctly, was Combat Evolved. And essentially, it took what we were already familiar with from the games Quake and Doom, but it kind of smoothed things over a little bit. Little nuances or buggy type things that would happen in those games, like getting caught up on corners or particularly with movement in the game, those were just smoothed over in Halo. It was very easy to move around, very easy to aim your weapon and to enjoy the sights and sounds. And that was another thing. Halo was always pushing the extreme in terms of visuals and in particular sound effects. And Halo 5, particularly with the sound effects, is no exception. The guns sound great, the soundtrack sounds amazing. If you watch the final credits, you'll see that they're using major Hollywood studios, at least for the sound scoring work. I believe some of the theme was recorded at Warner Brothers Studio. So they really spared no expense. Now, as I was saying, Bungie developed the first set of Halo games, Halo, Halo 2, Halo 3, I believe they did ODST, and I think they did Reach. I know it gets a little fuzzy in that part of the history for me. But Halo 4 is essentially where Microsoft had bought the property. They created their own in-house studio called 343 Industries and started taking it over. And not to do a full review on Halo 4, but for me personally, it's probably one of the weaker entries in the franchise in particular in terms of the character design of the enemies. Now they're still able to use the enemies that we love that Bungie developed, but for some reason they included this new class of Prometheans. And quite honestly, their design just leaves a lot to be desired for me. They kind of seem like a newer version. I don't know if you remember the games Star Fox on the old Nintendo systems, where basically everything was drawn with giant triangles, gray triangles all over the place. That is essentially what the Prometheans are, and there's a couple of problems with that character design for me, but we'll get into that a bit later. That being said, Halo 4 also ran extremely clunky, and all of that fluid motion that I was talking about that was so great in the early Halo games, for the Xbox 360 version of Halo 4, it was a mess. Master Chief felt extremely slow and sluggish. There were times where I would feel like I'm pressing the controller and waiting almost a full second for him to actually do what I'm trying to get him to do. Now, at the time, I thought that was possibly just bad programming on their part. However, I've replayed Halo 4 on the Xbox One, and it seems like that they were just pushing the specs of the Xbox 360 too far. Halo 4 on the Xbox One handles exactly like you remember the other Halos handling. It's smooth, it's responsive, and it was definitely a lot more fun to play on the Xbox One. That being said, the design of the enemies still left something to be desired for me. The Halo franchise is known overall as almost being this kind of interesting, it's almost like a love story between the Master Chief and his AI counterpart Cortana, who actually is an AI that kind of slips into the back of his head, although frequently she gets removed from there, and the missions involve having to find her and rescue her. And in Halo 4, they had added this storyline that she was becoming, I think they called it rampancy, where her programming was essentially starting to fail because she was, I believe it was 7 years old, and she was going to be dying soon. So there was really sweet, touching moments in those early Halo stories, even 4, with that relationship between Cortana and the Master Chief. So that now brings us to Halo 5. We've been waiting years. We have a brand new console that, quite honestly, a lot of us are still waiting for someone to show us what this console can do. There are a few games that have stood out in that way. I can say Batman Arkham Knight was a standout technically. Even the latest Tomb Raider, and I know they have a sequel that they're just about to release next week. Those technically are shining examples for the Xbox One. But Halo 5, is it really all that it's been led up to be? Hyped up to be? Well, let's talk about it. First of all, there's a lot of buzz going on the internet right now about the campaign, the actual advertising campaign that they did for Halo 5. They started letting us in on this story about Master Chief and another Spartan named Locke, and the fact that Locke was essentially against Master Chief and trying to hunt him down. There were visuals in these advertising campaigns, like the Master Chief wearing this like big cloak, almost like he's trying to stay hidden, a giant Master Chief statue that's out in the middle of this wasteland, and Locke is fighting the Master Chief around it. And none of that stuff exists in the game. As a matter of fact, I watched a video by IGN, and it's weird because they rate the game very high. I think they gave it an 8, but now they're releasing videos where they're just slamming the game, almost like the rating isn't accurate for some reason. Wink, wink. I don't know if you know anything about those big publications, but it's very hard to trust their rating. There's also a review out there that if you want to look more into this detail, I highly recommend checking out Angry Joe's review about Halo 5 and him talking about some other aspects that are kind of wonky with this latest installment. But that being said, for a fan like myself, the single campaign player version is enjoyable, and I've played through it on its highest difficulty, the legendary setting, and that would be my first tip to anyone that is buying this for themselves. Apparently, if you play it on normal, it is extremely easy, and you can get through the whole game in less than 5 hours, and there's a lot of people that are complaining about that. I can tell you, after playing through it on Legendary, it took me well more than 5 hours. I think it even took me more than 10 hours to get through it. Admittedly, it was because of the difficulty of the enemies. It's not that there was that much terrain to cover, it's just that you would get into these battle zone areas and the enemies were so tough you would have to kind of redo those areas over and over to figure out strategies and ultimately become a better player to get through it. And honestly, just as a tip for everyone, if you're playing first-person shooters and you've been playing them for a decade or more, if you want the most bang for your buck, I highly suggest you don't play them on the normal levels. The normal level in those types of video games, these games are made for a wide audience. You know, it used to be 20 years ago that there was video gamers, and maybe a normal game at that time was for a specific type of person. Now, these are major media productions. They're meant for everyone to be able to dive into, from 13-year-old kids, even younger in a lot of cases, all the way through adults. So normal doesn't quite mean what it used to mean anymore. So personally, when I jump into games like this, I go for at least the hard difficulty setting, which in Halo terms is heroic, or legendary, which is the one that I did play it on. So it took me, like I said, about 10 hours. Pretty enjoyable. However, some of the stuff that they're bringing into the gameplay is not really that new or fresh to me. Essentially, you are now playing with a team of Spartans, which a lot of people are also bringing up kind of works against the storyline that we've been told in the past. Before, we were told that Master Chief was the last Spartan, or one of the last Spartans, and now in this game there's at least 8 Spartans that you're able to play. I don't know if there's extended universe like comic books or other books or TV shows or stuff that explain where these other Spartans are coming from, but it just worked against the narrative for me a little bit that I know from the video game franchise. Also, with you playing as a team of Spartans, this felt a lot more like ODST, and we've kind of already done that before. ODST was essentially bigger levels. There is a single player campaign, but it wasn't really designed in that way. It was designed as more of a team experience with randomly generating enemies. big, wide open environments and tons of different ways to get through those environments. And that essentially is the type of level design that we have here in Halo 5. It is a step away from a very intense single player experience that is custom tailored for one person. Something like you might experience in the Battlefield series in their single player campaigns, where there's events that only one person can do and get through. And those events in terms of telling the story for me are usually extremely memorable, and I can think of tons of those type of events from previous Halos. This one doesn't really have that. There's a few scenes where you're like, okay, they had to design that specifically for the single player campaign. But other than that, the majority of the game feels like it really could have been a multiplayer experience. Like, they are just wide open maps. There's tons of enemies that could be replaced with other online players, and then essentially you would have what the new Star Wars Battlefront is offering, where it's just an online experience and there is no single player campaign. This still isn't quite to that point, but it feels to me like Halo 5 takes a big step towards that type of mentality, and I personally think that first-person shooters offer a lot more than just those big battle arena type battles, and unfortunately Halo 5 does not shine in that way. My biggest knock about Halo 5 is this guy. You've probably seen more of him in this review than you will see in Halo 5. Essentially, the storyline centers a lot more on the other Spartans that are following the Master Chief. And in terms of storytelling, for me, that's a bit of a cheat, because the real interesting story is probably going on with the Master Chief and him trying to once again find Cortana. But instead of being in that narrative that is highly emotional, probably has a ton of great dialogue, we are one generation removed from that. We are on the heels of these people trying to figure out why they're going after Cortana, which the dialogue, of course, is not going to be as intense. Another weird thing in terms of the story, Nathan Fillion returns, and he actually was in, I believe it was ODST that he was a main character, and he was in ODST. And in terms of Halo lore, the ODSTs are not Spartans, but for some reason now in Halo 5 he's a Spartan. And in terms of the story we've been told before, you have to be a Spartan at birth. There's genetic engineering that's involved. Spartans are a lot larger than normal people, and they even show this in Halo 5 in a couple of the cutscenes. So for me, they've missed a big hole in the story by not explaining to us what has happened to Nathan Fillion's character, Buck. Why is he now as big as the other Spartans? How did he go from being a normal man? I mean, there's a great story there that could be told. Maybe they did some type of genetic engineering late in life, or maybe this was some clone of the other Buck or something. There's definitely ways they could have explained it, and it just seems like it was passed over. And quite honestly, a lot of parts of the story they feel extremely unfinished. It really feels like the writers on this didn't have a firm grip on the story they wanted to tell. And it's really noticeable because as the game progresses and you get close to the end, all of a sudden it's like they finally got a sense of the story they wanted to tell, and the last few chapters in particular have kind of the Halo that you know and love in terms of storytelling, but it takes a long time to get to those points, and then the game is basically over right where the interesting story is about to begin. So in terms of story, that's my review on it. It's not really very strong. Now, in terms of gameplay, the squad-based gameplay, particularly in the single campaign, is interesting. It's a mixed bag. Unfortunately, and you're going to see this in other reviews all over the place, the artificial intelligence that they've programmed for your fellow soldiers is horrible. It's really, really bad. Once again, this is not an example that is showing what the Xbox One should be capable of. And it's funny because there's even quotes coming from Microsoft officials about how brilliant the AI is. It's not. It's clunky. They get in the way often. You'll be shooting at an enemy and all of a sudden your own soldier will step right in front of you and block your shot. There's this interesting gameplay dynamic now where if you start to die, there's a certain window of time where you can call for help, kind of like Gears of War. But the AI doesn't always respond to it. You'll literally have a character standing right next to you, and they won't turn around and help you get up. Or they'll try to run in and help you get up, even though you have enemies standing right next to you, still firing at your dead corpse. And then all the enemies do is turn their attention on the AI and kill them instantly. It's really not smart. As a matter of fact, when my wife and I were playing together, typically we would send the AI off into the distance just to get them clear of us, so we didn't have to deal with the problems of the AI. And luckily, that's one point that's kind of cool. You can pick a point on the map or pick an enemy and press up on the directional pad, and that will tell the AI to go engage that spot or that enemy or take that turret or get in that vehicle. So the ability to give them kind of minor orders and control them a little bit really helps, but I don't think it helps in the way that 343 intended. It really helps to get them out of your way so that you could focus on the gameplay that you need to do to survive the level. That being said, I enjoy the single player campaign. I'm sure I'll play through it again with my wife at some point, but I don't believe it's going to be the same type of experience we have with the previous Halo games, where we go and play those over and over and over. I'm sure I've played through Halo 1, 2, and 3 in particular, maybe at least 6 or 7 times each, all the way through from beginning to end. And those are extremely enjoyable experiences. It's kind of a fun pastime of my wife and I to play co-op mode on those campaigns. The character design issues that I mentioned with Halo 4, unfortunately, you're going to face a lot of those characters again in Halo 5. The Prometheans are kind of the main bad guy, so you're going to be looking at a lot of silver triangles all over the place. And let me tell you what doesn't work about those characters for me. The fun about Halo is, once again, combat evolved. And when you go up against the Covenant, if you shoot a grub in the head, it splats, it squishes. If you blow it up with a grenade, its body goes flying. There are physics that actually react to what you're doing in terms of shooting that character. And that is enjoyable for someone playing a first-person shooter. As a matter of fact, some people might say that the Flood, the characters from earlier Halos that are these kind of genetic mutants, they really splat and squish, and it's really enjoyable to melee one of them or take them out with a sword and watch this splatter go everywhere. The Prometheans don't bleed. They have small physics reactions, but not in a way that is very satisfying when you're shooting them. Like, you might be able to knock their helmet off, or if you shoot their shoulder, a piece of their armor might chunk off, or if you shoot them in the chest, you might see a triangle spin around in a circle. I mean, it's just not extremely satisfying. And they have these like Promethean dogs, these four-legged ones that shoot out of their mouth, and they use these dogs so much in Halo 5 that you will literally be cussing about it by the end of the game, saying, not another bleeping dog. The character design is extremely limited. As a matter of fact, I don't know if there is any new characters from Halo 4 to Halo 5 outside of the actual Guardians. And that's probably one of the biggest complaints of this game. It is titled Halo 5 Guardians, and the Guardians are largely just a prop. You will never fight a Guardian in this game. You'll see them floating in the sky. It looks like you can have a great battle against them, but you will never get to engage them, which is a huge, huge bummer. So, honestly, between the type of gameplay that is now battlefield-based, squad-based, the story narrative that really you're only spending maybe 20 to 30% of your time with Master Chief, and the rest of the game you're with this other Spartan that, quite honestly, you really don't care about all that much. It's hard for me to rate this game very highly. If you're a Halo fanboy, you're going to get it. Go ahead and get it, but just don't play through it on normal. I really think you're going to be kicking yourself if you do that, and you'll get much more gameplay out of it if you step up the difficulty level on it. If you're not a Halo fanboy, honestly, at this point, if you haven't played through the Master Chief Collection, I would say pick that up instead. There is a lot more better storytelling. There are great gameplay mechanics already in those old games. They really hold up very well. And you don't run into those character design issues. I mean, you will if you play into Halo 4, but it's not as prevalent as it is in Halo 5. You are just up against that same type of enemy over and over and over. You're going to see so many silver triangles, it's going to make your eyes bleed. So it's weird. I would rate this, I think, a 7. I really didn't get into multiplayer. The multiplayer is pretty enjoyable. However, it seems like there's a pretty limited selection of maps. Big Team Battle is missing, but they have this new Warzone and Warzone Arena mode that are pretty interesting. It's basically base captures where you're either defending or trying to capture bases. In one of the modes, you're also taking on extra things outside of that for a points total. I've played a little bit of the arena modes, which is the smaller team stuff, but quite honestly, for a player like me, I really enjoy the campaigns a lot more. There's just something about my anxiety level where when I'm playing with strangers that I just don't quite enjoy it as much. So that's why I was really hoping that this would be a very solid campaign, and it kind of is. It's not the best campaign, definitely not the best Halo campaign I've played, but anyway. I know Angry Joe rated it a 6. He's catching a lot of flack for that. I know IGN rated it, like I said, an 8 or maybe even a 9. And I don't think they really believe that with all the negative information they're kicking out with that. For me personally, if you're a Halo fan, I think it's a 7.5. If you're not a Halo fan, I think I would go more with Angry Joe and say this is a 6 out of 10. This is something that's enjoyable, but kind of basic. It's something that we've seen before. It feels like a cross between Halo ODST and Halo Reach with the other Spartans and kind of armors and different stuff like that. There's also a lot of people griping about the Rex system. It seems okay for me, but I'm not big on microtransactions, and Microsoft has basically worked away from microtransactions into this version of Halo, and I believe that might be a stepping stone to where we start seeing it be a little more necessary in later Halo games, which I'm not a big fan of. Quite honestly, I hope that 343 takes a look at all the feedback from people about this game, and for Halo 6 gives us a single player campaign based on the Master Chief that has a bunch of unique single player experience that is memorable to us. That's definitely not what we have here in Halo 5, but looks like we're going to have to wait a while for Halo 6. So if you've been playing Halo 5, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'm looking forward to catching up with all of you on that, and thank you so much for joining me on this Geekin' Dorks review. See you back out on the field.